not the...
Yeah, Frank and I used to argue about who has most grandkids and all of that. That's a great picture. It sure is. Well, you guys, this is a big deal, what we're doing here. This is the first time in 25 years or so that we've had a major environmental change, and it's, if you look up here and you see this glittering array of progressives and conservatives, and it's something that we're all very proud of. I have to single out Senators Vitter and Udall, and you'll find out in a minute why. But let me just say this very briefly. This does fulfill the legacy of Frank Lautenberg. And we've been a joy to have worked with him and to know that his wishes are now becoming a reality. And I want to say this, that we're very proud on the majority is now the Republicans. We worked very hard. We'll take a lot of the credit for it, but it was a joint effort. And I would say this to those individuals who talk about the family's protection. It's also a huge protection for businesses all over America. And if we were to do anything or maintain what we'd had before, we'd still be sending jobs overseas because we don't have the predictability, we don't have the consistency from state to state, which we now have. So I'm very proud of everyone who is working on this. And I would say to those that the Republicans should look at this as fulfilling our constitutional duty to take care of interstate commerce and the regulatory process. So we have a lot of people involved in this thing, and I want to single out Tom Udall and ask him to come up and kind of lead this thing along and give you his perspective from the Democrat side and the Republican side. But I'm proud of everyone who's up here before you, and this is a big deal.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman Inhofe. Everybody has always said around here when you talk about legislating and getting things done, what's one of the ways to do it, and always an essential is having a strong chairman. So thank you so much, because I know you pushed and pulled and you did whatever it took to work both the Senate side and the House side, and I really appreciate that. You know, somebody asked me, how does this feel? And I'm a mountain climber, and when you're on the top of a summit, it's pure elation. And that's how I feel today. And this feeling is pretty close to that mountain climbing. The only thing we're lacking is the beautiful, inspiring landscape. And so I'm here just honored to share this magnificent achievement in this toxic environment, and pardon the pun here, with all of my colleagues that are surrounding me up here. I think this is a great triumph of bipartisanship. You know, most Americans think when you go to a grocery store or you go to a hardware store and you buy a product, they think that it's been tested for safety. It hasn't been tested. And now we're going to see that that testing is in place, and we move forward with a very tough cop on the beat, which will be the EPA looking at the safety of products, doing that analysis, and I'm going to be all over the implementation of this because I think that's a very important step. And many of us were over in the House of Representatives for the joint statement. I talked to Gina McCarthy. She says she's going to get this thing implemented and get it up and rolling, and she's well aware that this is headed in her direction. But I just want to touch a couple of things before I introduce Senator Vitter, who has been my great partner in this. This new law will require the EPA, and these are the big things that it does. It's going to do many other things. This will require the EPA to protect the most vulnerable people, children, the elderly, pregnant women, and chemical workers. It will give the EPA new authority to order tests and ensure chemicals are safe, starting with the biggest risk, such as known carcinogens and those with high toxicity. Ensure the EPA reviews new chemicals before they go on the market. They weren't even able to do that. And provide the EPA with resources to do the job. Industry will do its share to support the program, providing $25 million a year. That is significant in the climate that we exist in here in Washington, and set mandatory enforceable deadlines for the EPA to act. And so that's going to lead, I think, to a very good, strong regulator on top of all of this. But let me just say a couple of words, first of all, about my partner, David Vitter. You know, we met 3 years ago. We had dinner. We picked this up from Frank Lautenberg, who had really kicked it off. We're kind of here in the spirit of Frank Lautenberg because the bipartisanship here started with Frank. When he introduced his bill with Senator Vitter, they had 12 Democrats and 12 Republicans working together. He passed away 6 weeks later. Senator Vitter and I mourned him, and then we sat down for dinner and we said, what do we do to carry this on? And we both just committed to each other we were going to get this done. And he's been a great partner. He's kept his word. Whenever he asked me to do something, I did it, and it would work, and the same thing was true the other way around. So we have a speaking order up here. I know that Senator Markey wants to come in a little earlier because some. No, but okay, we'll stick with it. So the folks that have joined us here, every one of them played a key role, and you've got to understand when you do something this big and this magnificent, you're going to have a lot of people. So. You know, Jack Kennedy used to say that victory creates 1,000 fathers and defeat is an orphan. Well, this is a case where we have victory and we don't have 1,000 fathers up here yet, but we're going to get some. David Vitter, come on up.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Like everybody here, I'm genuinely excited about this really significant achievement. This law has been in need of updating for decades. Every stakeholder in sight, everyone involved in this part of the economy and the law has said that. The trick has been bringing everyone together on a bipartisan basis. And I'm very, very excited that we've finally done that after years, after decades that it's been in need of updating, and after 5 years of hard work. I first sat down with Frank and started talking to him about a bipartisan bill over 5 years ago. Then in 2013, we got particularly serious about it, and by April had made really a breakthrough and put together a strong bipartisan bill and introduced that in May. And then tragically, as Tom mentioned, he passed away just 6 weeks later. But also, as Tom said, Tom stepped in as a full and active partner to drive the train on the Democratic side, and we committed right then, soon after Frank's funeral, that we were going to get this done and continue to make the progress we needed to finally pass it. And everyone here made substantial contributions to the bill to get it over the goal line. I certainly want to also echo Tom's words that Jim Inhofe's contributions were enormous as chairman, really driving and making sure it got done. Same thing with John Shimkus on the House side as subcommittee chairman, really driving and making sure this got done. This will achieve my two essential goals from the very beginning. First, make sure we fully protect all Americans' health and safety. And second, make sure we create a workable regulatory environment so that our leaders in science and innovation and technology, and our companies in the sector are world leaders in that, can remain world leaders, can continue to innovate, bring new products to market that are helpful to the consumer and that are great for our competitiveness and for our economy. We've done both of those things, and I'm very, very pleased with the outcome. So with that, we'll now go to John Shimkus.
John, let me just say a word about you. I want to tell you, John and I have been good friends. I served, as many of you know, 10 years in the House of Representatives. We traveled together. Our wives were and are very good friends. And John Shimkus saw the advantage to this, saw how it would really make a difference for business, the environment, public health. I know he came over a long time ago. He met Bonnie Lautenberg, and he says, I'm going to do this on the House side. And this is a great example of a subcommittee chairman picking up the ball and really making sure that it got done. Thank you, John, very much. Yeah.
Well, it's great to be over in the House of Lords. Thank you for allowing me to come by. I bring greetings from my other colleagues from the House, and there was a lot of people who were involved. I want to thank Chairman Upton for allowing me to do this as a subcommittee chairman. Really, he did allow me to pick up and work this over the years. A lot of the reporters know that as they followed the story. Of course, Frank Pallone, who said, "I'll work with you if you're really trying to get a law, not a messaging bill." And so and Frank engaged pretty quickly in the process. Of course, Diana DeGette and Gene Green, I want to make sure I mention their names. Paul Tonko didn't vote for the bill, but he was the ranking member of the subcommittee and was very active and very engaged in the process. And I think also very, very helpful. But David Vitter came over 5.5 years ago, it sounds like 25 years ago, and said he was going to do this with Senator Lautenberg. And I said, come see me when you get any success. And then a couple years later, he popped back in, and then that really made us to get more serious on moving on the House side. And then it's been a yin and yang, back and forth, and constant communication. I also want to, as you did on the floor last night, Senator, we really got to thank the professional staff who just, above and beyond the call of duty, it really helps keep the faith in our system. When we go home, they're working on weekends. They're doing the calls. They're struggling to help fight through these compromises, and without them, we wouldn't be where we're at today. So thank you for letting me be part of this momentous occasion. So thank you.
We next have Senator Carper. If you all have followed the legislative history on this, when we were headed into as the chairman knows, headed into mark it up at the Environment and Public Works Committee, we only had one Democrat on board, and that was Tom Carper, who was on the bill. Then we were joined by, and then we were joined by Sheldon Whitehouse, Jeff Merkley, and Cory Booker, we call them the trio. But Tom, I really appreciate all the work you've done, and you've got a great expertise in understanding your state and all the things that go on there. So thank you. Thank you very much. You were kind of lonely there for a while till the trio joined you.
It's lonely at the bottom. So. I want to understand, Tom Udall said he's a mountain climber, and he gets elation. Elation is a word he used, Shelley, before you got here. One of the things that gives him elation in his life is being at the top of the mountain. And he said being here today and being able to celebrate this bipartisan victory has some great elation as well. I'm from Delaware. We're the lowest lying state in the country. Shell was just there the other day. And the highest point of land in Delaware is a bridge. So we don't get a lot of elation by climbing that bridge. But you know what brings us elation in Delaware is when Democrats and Republicans and people from all walks of life pull together and tackle difficult issues and solve them and reach a principled compromise that moves the ball forward in a lot of different ways. Not all of you know this about Jim Minhoff. We and Cory and some others, we go to this Bible study group most Thursday, and we meet in his hideaway, and with the chaplain. And it's for the 7 or 8 of us that need the most help. And one of the things Jim Inhofe has done with his life for years is he's gone to Africa. He's gone to Africa to witness to leaders of African countries. And I went to Africa last to Tanzania last year for an Aspen Institute seminar. And I learned this great African proverb. And it goes something like this. If you want to travel fast, go alone. If you want to travel far, go together. If you want to travel fast, go alone. If you want to travel far, go together. And under his leadership, where's David? David Vitter's leadership, we decided to travel together. And a lot of folks helped us, our staff, and a lot of groups, business groups, environmental groups, health groups. And as a result, we've been able to travel a long, long way. We just come from a speech from the Prime Minister of India, and a wonderful speech, I thought. He talked about our shared values between India and our country. And I would just say one of the among the shared values that have brought us together, the Democrats and Republicans, different uniforms, same team, okay? Different uniforms, same teams. But among our shared values are these. We want to make sure that our kids and our grandchildren grow up in a cleaner, safer environment. We want to make sure that their health is better because of the way that we've addressed the toxic chemicals in our environment. We want to make sure that when they finish school and go off into the world, they can get a good job and support themselves and their families. And I think the beauty of the compromise that's been reached here, thanks to the efforts of a whole lot of people, is we have taken these shared values and we've woven them together to create a piece of legislation that I think is going to help us as a nation for a long, long time. And as we struggle with other issues that we have a hard time getting them done and finding consensus on those, I would just say if we can somehow find the middle, find a sweet spot here on toxic substance that gets the kind of margins that we've achieved in the House and Senate, maybe we can get some other things done here this year as well. And I'm betting that we can. What did Wayne Gretzky used to say? Wayne Gretzky, great hockey player. He used to say, people said, "Why do you take so many shots on goal?" And he said, "I missed every shot I never took." I missed every shot I never took. Well, we took this shot together, and we scored a really, really big goal. Thank you so much. And now, please hold your applause. A recovering governor from a big state, former governor, Michael Rounds. Mr. Rounds, Governor.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Governor. Thank you. Look, I'm here as much to bring attention to the folks that are sharing the stage today. Number one, I can't tell you how much I've learned about leadership from watching this team up here work. As a former governor, you look at results. And sometimes when you're looking at results, you realize that it takes more than just a good idea. It takes people that are providing leadership. It takes people that are persevering. And it takes people that are willing to work in a bipartisan manner. And that's what's happened here. You know, if changing these and fixing these pieces of legislation was easy, it would have been done a long time ago. This hasn't been updated since 1976 when it was first put in. And that tells you something about how much it took from the team behind us right now to get it done. I wanted to, first of all, just to congratulate the folks that are up here. I can't say enough about Chairman Inhofe and the way that he puts this together. Ranking Member Boxer, Senator Vitter and Senator Udall, they just didn't quit on it. Chairman Upton, it wouldn't have happened if he wouldn't have been there. And Congressman Shimkus and everybody who worked so tirelessly to get this thing across the finish line. You know, the reforms that have been made by both the House and the Senate will help to make sure that Americans are protected from harmful toxic chemicals. But this also created that regulatory certainty for businesses and manufacturers across the country that was no longer there. So this is a very good bipartisan effort, and it points to results. And there's plenty of success in this to go around for both Republicans and Democrats. I look forward to President Obama signing it into law and adding another bipartisan effort to the growing list of accomplishments that we've been able to achieve in this Congress. And I think that says a lot about it. Once again, it would not have happened without the leadership that's up here behind me right now. This is a team effort, but you need good leaders. And these folks provided a lot of that effort. The perseverance did not quit. And finally, they did it in a bipartisan effort. It doesn't get out of the Senate without being bipartisan. And so my congratulations to the entire team up here for a job very well done. Thank you. And if I could, let me just share with you, I had a chance to visit Rhode Island. We have the USS South Dakota, which is not completed yet, but we went out there for a keel laying. And during this time in which, as you all know, Sheldon, Senator Whitehouse gets up and talks about climate change on a regular basis, 138 or 139 times now. Yeah. And the day that I was in Rhode Island, there was a blizzard. And the senator was kind enough to catch a picture of me at the airport in the middle of a blizzard. And as I shared with him, you know, there are some things that we may disagree on, but the one thing that we do want to do is to maintain an environment across the entire country that we can be proud of, and that we'll have that in common regardless of how we go about getting that done. So with that, I would like to ask Senator Whitehouse to step forward.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, sir.
I am desperate to get Mike Rounds back to Rhode Island and show him that we are not a snowbound state. He was there in April, and it was rather extraordinary weather, and I'm afraid that poor fella got the wrong impression about my state. This bill is like a spaceship that is now in a stable, safe orbit but getting there was like a multi-stage rocket launch. I had the pleasure of participating in the Merkley-Booker-White House trio stage that was one of the steps that got us here. And I want to thank Jeff and Corey. It was really a pleasure to work with them and with their staffs. Our work would have been for naught had it not have been for the openness of David Vitter and of Chairman Inhofe to our efforts to allow it to proceed as we wished. And once our stage was successfully deployed, we've been actively engaged in trying to make sure that it finds where it is now, which is safe orbit headed for the president's desk. Two particular thanks before I turn it over to Ed Markey. One is to Tom Udall, who really suffered the agonies of Prometheus, getting from that earliest launch date through to this moment. There were lots of near-death experiences for this bill, and I think more than anybody on our side, Tom Udall carried this through those difficult points. The second person is Chairman Inhofe. Jim and I disagree about a great deal, and we have been known to exchange words on the things that we disagree about. But one thing that we learn as senators is to look at process mastery taking place and appreciate it. And from the very beginning, Chairman Inhofe has given us the space to make this work, has shown persistence right up until last night, negotiating on the floor to get the final clearance done. He has been a hands-on chairman when he needed to be. He's let his members have scope when they needed to. It has, Jim, been a lesson for me in Senate chairmaning, if that's a word, and I appreciate it. And I turn it over now to Ed Markey.
Okay, Ed.
Thank you, Sheldon, so much. And take a picture of this. You might not see it again this year. It is bipartisan. It is bicameral. It is Democrat. It is Republican. It is liberal. It is conservative. It is urban. It is rural. And why is that the case? And it is because these dangerous chemicals affect every family in America, regardless of where they live. And so that's why we're all here and so happy, actually. You know, and you are right. It took a lot to be here. The House bill and the Senate bill, to put it mildly, did not bear any resemblance to each other. So it took a lot of compromise. So all my conversation with John Shimkus over the last 6 weeks, Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, reflects the conversations that we were having here with Jim Inhofe and with Chairman Vitter and Tom Udall and all of this incredible gang behind us all worked very, very hard. And the reason we had to work so hard is that unlike Superfund, unlike the Clean Air Act, unlike the Clean Water Act, unlike the Safe Drinking Water Act, this law never worked. So when President Gerald Ford signed this Toxic Substance Control Act in 1976, he said that he believed, quote, this legislation may be one of the most important pieces of environmental legislation that has ever been enacted by the United States Congress. He could not have been more wrong. He would have no way of knowing that TSCA utterly failed to live up to that promise. After industry sued to overturn EPA's proposed ban on asbestos, a substance so dangerous that it is now banned in 54 other countries, EPA's hands were tied and its authority rendered toothless. So for the last 40 years, TSCA has sat in the garage like an Edsel, an environmental and politically obsolete law that never got updated. And so what happened here is it took everyone working together to turn it into a usable law. And as a result, thousands of chemicals now seep into the bloodstreams of every single American, going largely untested, unchecked, and unregulated. America's children and families became the unwitting subjects of a toxic chemical regime, and President Ford's hopes for chemical safety reform went unfulfilled. But last night, the Senate changed the history of this toxic nightmare. Members of both the Senate and the House of Representatives have come together to create a new chemical Magna Carta, a chemical Bill of Rights for every American that will serve as the foundation for protecting the American people from the dangers of toxic substances. We made sure that the EPA will have industry fees to do its chemical safety work. Without the money, the EPA can't do its job. We made sure that there will be enforceable deadlines for the EPA to write chemical safety rules and for industry to mandatorily comply with them. We fixed the legal problems in the law that paralyzed EPA and prevented it from regulating some of the most toxic chemicals ever made, including TSCA, asbestos, and Teflon. We made sure EPA would act more quickly to regulate the most dangerous chemicals, and that vulnerable subpopulations like children, pregnant women, and workers would be protected. We made sure that industry could not continue to improperly keep information about dangerous chemicals secret to prevent people from learning what might be poisoning them or their families. And in some of the last negotiations, we made sure that the states could continue with the work that they have already been doing to protect their residents. And I am particularly proud that we were able to protect states like Massachusetts and their pending flame retardant law in these last few key changes we made in the bill. With EPA now able to take the steps which are necessary, we are in a new era. And you know you're in a new era when the Chamber of Commerce and the trial lawyers endorse the same bill. You know you're in a new era when the American Chemistry Council and the Environmental Defense Fund and ExxonMobil all endorse the new bill. Take a picture of what you're seeing here today. Take a picture. This is very unlikely to happen again in the future. So I just want to thank everyone, and my friend from the great state of West Virginia, Shelley Moore Capito. I recognize you for your great leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will be very brief, but I just wanted to get the opportunity to add my voice of congratulations to the chairman, to my friends on the House side, who I was lucky enough to serve for 14 years, to Senator Udall for your leadership, and Senator Vitter, and all of the others that are here. This is an historic framework. My passion for this comes from living in an area that does create, much like Senator Carper, we create a lot of chemicals in the state of West Virginia. And those of you may recall that we had an incident where we had a chemical leak into our drinking water supply 2 years ago that had a major impact on our way of life, and really brought home to me, because it impacted my home as well, how much we need to know about where and how chemicals are going to impact a drinking water supply, the transparency that's connected with that. And so I'm really pleased that in this bill we set we do prioritize any kind of, particularly looking at chemicals that are near or close to any kind of water source, which makes, I'm talking about the water company, which is ours was just like a quarter of a mile up the river from the intake of our major water company. So that to me is an important addition to this bill, along with all of the other great items that we've heard about. Hopefully will prevent another incident from that happening, and God forbid if it does happen, we can react quickly with accurate information, not just on how to solve it, but also on the health ramifications that could proceed from it. So thank you all very much for everything you've done today. It's a pleasure for me to be a part of this group. I'm a newbie over here, but I know that John and Fred have worked hard over on the House side to make sure that today is a good day. So I celebrate this with my colleagues. Thank you.
Jeff Merkley is next.
Yes.
Well, last night the nation was focused on the 6 final primaries and the outcome of those primaries as we are in this presidential season. But while something extraordinary was happening there with the first case in which a major political party has nominated a woman for the presidential ticket, and congratulations to Hillary Clinton on that, something extraordinary was happening here in Congress, on the floor of the Senate. The completion of this journey that's been so well described by my colleagues, that began with Frank Lautenberg reaching out to David Vitter, with Tom Udall stepping in to carry the partnership, the chairman and the ranking member Boxer, and so many pitching in with key ideas and key strategies to keep bringing us together when everything seemed ready to blow apart. Yesterday I had the chance to speak to Bonnie Lautenberg, and I want to thank her for her tremendous advocacy. I suspect many here received phone calls from her saying, find a way to take this forward, encouraging us to go forward. And she was very, very happy with the completion of the congressional leg of this journey, and I certainly hope she'll be able to be here with some of the extended family when the bill is signed in the Oval Office. I first became interested in this issue when I was in the Oregon State Legislature, and we had a bill that brought up the fact that in our carpets and in the foam in our furniture and in the upholstery, there is a cancer-causing flame retardant that all of us are breathing in on a regular basis. Think now about the children that you raised, the babies that you had who were crawling around on the rug, their noses 1 inch off the ground, breathing in that dust laden with cancer-causing chemicals. And the fact is, this existed because we didn't have an effective law to be able to take on the toxics in everyday environment. And now we do. And it will make a big difference in all kinds of ways to the things we encounter in everyday life. We had an experiment out in Oregon where people wore silicone bracelets that pick up all the chemicals you come in contact with. And after they'd worn these bracelets for a week, they were analyzed. And the people who were wearing them were shocked by all the toxic things they encountered. And they wondered, where did we encounter this in our home, or in our business, or on the mass transit, or in our car? How did this happen? Well, it happened because we had no review that kept toxic chemicals out of everyday products. But this bill will do that. It'll do it for existing chemicals, and it will do it for future chemicals. You referred to the Edsel in the garage, Ed, and I know you've worked on this for so many years in both houses. Well, that is now some shiny, brand new, fancy, maybe a Tesla is coming out of the garage. It is outrageous that for 25 years we have been powerless. The most powerful nation on earth has been powerless to regulate toxic chemicals. That ends now, and I felt honored to be part of this team, to witness this extraordinary legislative journey through both houses with bipartisan involvement. We need more of this type of partnership across the aisle to address the issues facing America. But today is a day to celebrate. Well done to all of you. Thank you.
Okay, there are questions.
Senator Udall, I was wondering if you could, as an important environment appropriator, what will you do to ensure that implementation is properly funded? There's legislation, your legislation on the Environment Interior Subcommittee is likely service in the coming week or 2 weeks. Will there be a portion of the EPA allocation that is carved out for TSCA reform implementation?
Yeah, thank you very much. And let me explain the funding. You're getting me into the weeds a little bit, but I think it's important to understand it, and it's a very good question. The current EPA funding for TSCA is approximately $56 million per year. This funding is appropriated by Congress and used to process new chemicals and other work that the agency does. User fees are small and go to the general treasury, and under the bill, the funding's going to change. The current $56 million will be supplemented with user fees from industry. That will equal 25% of the fees and up to $25 million per year if the appropriations go up. User fees will go to the EPA's TSCA Implementation Fund, not to the Treasury. It will come as a fee for service to pay for testing, prioritizing, processing new and existing chemicals. The industry can nominate additional chemicals for review. If EPA agrees to review them, and that's in their discretion, the industry will pay 100% of the cost. So we have different ways of getting it funding, but clearly what I'm going to be fighting for is to make sure that EPA has the funds to do the job, because this is too important to our families and too important to our children.
Do you have any type of idea on how much you're going to have to allocate for implementation in this coming fiscal year, so with this legislation that you're working on?
Well, we aren't marking up our bill. I believe the bill until June the 14th, and I don't even know if that's that firm a date. So I would like to get back to you on that day as to what we're looking at and where we're headed.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, thank you. That's where we're marking up in the subcommittee, and I think several days later marking up in the main committee. Other questions, thoughts? Just while you're thinking, let me say one thing. One of the things, several of the speakers mentioned this, the professional staff and how hard they worked, and I just want to thank Jennifer Talhelm, with my office, Jonathan Black, Andrew Wallace, and then the whole team in my office that kind of took up the slack because they were working on this very focused issue for so long. And last night I did a much wider thank you of everyone. In fact, Senator McCain, when we interrupt his bill, accused me of thanking everybody in the world. But there were so many people that worked on it, and we'll get you that list if you want to see it. But it's been pretty amazing how the staff and the members have all pulled together to get this done. Yeah, please go ahead.
With on the books, what do you want to see from EPA as they turn to implement this new authority?
Yeah, you bet. Excellent question. Here's what we think with EPA and how it will be set up. First, we need to manage expectations and ensure that we get off on the right foot, not the fastest foot. It needs to start on a manageable scale to build capacity and then turn the ship around. We need to make sure EPA is able to do the job, and as we talked about here, making sure that the funding's there. This bill gives 6 months to select the first 10 chemicals. EPA will not miss that deadline. That's one of the enforceable deadlines I talked about. It will take 3 to 6 months to select 10 chemicals. The Obama EPA will make that decision, obviously. It is the first deadline in the bill, the enforceable deadline. EPA has already begun to set chemical priorities before this law was passed. I expect EPA will not throw away the work they've done on work plans and putting those chemicals in the various orders. And I hope they will prioritize chemicals like asbestos and other hazardous chemicals on their work plan. They are considering flame retardants and some solvents, things like and this one's a tough one, but ibromopropane, which is propane, and we'll get you the right spelling of that. There are plenty of other early candidates. I don't want to jump too far out on the EPA, but several regulations in the bill will have a 1-year deadline, and as soon as it's signed, EPA will start cranking and get up and get going with the job. The $56 million appropriations is enough for EPA to start on the first 10, and once the fees kick in 3 years, the EPA will begin identifying more chemicals, a minimum of 20, and they have the ability, I think, to do more than that. So I think that all the procedures will need to be in place in the next 2 years. So I think that covers pretty well what we're doing there. I think you had a question?
Senator Paul took to the floor before you guys passed it and voiced some concerns about overregulation and just EPA implementing the actual law. What would you say in response to some of those things that Senator Paul had raised as potential pitfalls to the
Well, I first of all think this raises the issue of preemption, and we got to go into the weeds a little bit there. But on overregulation, there's very, very little regulation right now. The system is completely broken. The EPA does not have the ability to do its job at all because in 1991 of a court ruling that basically gutted the agency. And so I think if you really look at what the issue is putting them back up and operating on a viable basis. And so I don't think this is anywhere near what you would call an issue of overregulation. This is about standing up an agency and getting it to do its job. But let me talk about the part of it that you've also indicated here on preemption. And here are the basics, and I believe it represents really a fair balance between state power and federal power. States would not be preempted where EPA is not acting on a specific chemical and uses. And there are thousands of chemicals out there, 85,000 in existence. And so though all those thousands that are out there are open to regulation by states, so there's more than enough for everyone to work on. If the EPA is working on 20 or 25, you still have probably several thousand that are considered dangerous that the states can work on. So there's a lot of work for both state and federal government. There's no preemption of individual rights to go to court for damages, which is incredibly important. The bill makes clear it does not intervene or affect ongoing litigation. And you've seen many of the articles around the country. There are various lawsuits going on chemicals against big chemical companies. We're not impacting any of those at all. The bill makes clear that it does not intervene, and as I said, that kind of litigation. And the pause preemption is limited to just the risk evaluation period of around 3 years and structured so that it doesn't stop states who have begun acting. This is key, and it benefits all states that are out there. And the other final issue is the waiver issue. There are reasonable waivers from preemption for state, from both pause and final preemption when the EPA has finalized a restriction. And so we give a lot of liberty to states to act and the federal government to act, and we also give that uniformity that I think the business community has been looking for. And let me also just say what several of the others have said about this photograph here. This photograph was taken by Bonnie Lautenberg. Bonnie, and this is Frank and his grandchildren, he used to talk every day in the committee about his grandchildren. And when he would ask questions, you could see he was always thinking, how does this affect my children and my grandchildren? And that was his passion. He always believed, Frank believed that this would impact his children and grandchildren more than anything he did in public life. And he was one champion on public health. You'll remember the things he did on smoking, airlines, indoor air pollution, all of those kinds of things. And I really believe that. I think that's true. And so Bonnie took that and that photo, and she was our guiding light. As everybody said here, I'm just sorry she couldn't be standing here with us. She'll be down for whatever the president does, I'm sure. And she would make phone calls. She was persistent, even yesterday in terms of the scheduling. She was on the phone with Mitch McConnell to say, when can we get this scheduled? So she's been a pretty amazing kind of 101st senator to be a part of this process. So with that, Jen, yeah, are we doing? Yeah, okay. I think we're holding up the rest of the gallery here, but go ahead. Yeah.
Is it your impression that you may not need more than $56 million to pursue implementation over the coming fiscal year? My impression of the fees is that it will actually start to accumulate further down the line, so you might need a kind of front.
Jonathan, what do you say on that? I mean, I think they have the ability to start out, is my understanding, and because he really knows this backwards and forwards. My understanding that $56 million, they feel they have the ability to start this process of selecting the 10 and moving forward on the 10, and then we'll be working on the appropriations in the future. Is that, Jonathan, what do you think?
structured the fees by working with EPA. That's how we picked the numbers. That's how we figured out this is the first 10 that we could do from their base budget. They'll be writing a rule to collect fees, and as time goes by, they'll be building capacity. And so that's where we'll be adding up to 20 in the next coming years. But to begin, that 56 should be appropriate.
And remember also again, if a chemical company has a chemical they want reviewed, they can make and they believe it's urgent, they can come to the EPA and they can say, you know, we want this one reviewed. The EPA has the discretion, but then the company pays 100%. And so you have the ability to supplement what you're doing with companies that are making that kind of selection. And so that works from the beginning, right, Jonathan? So you know, tomorrow, when we get this signed and the first day afterwards, if a company comes forward, then they pay 100%. And that obviously, that fee goes into the fund, but then it will be supplementing the budget that's there for the EPA. Thank you all very much. Jen Talhelm is my communications director. If you have any other questions, we'd be happy to walk you through all of this. And there are many of the other staff members that worked very hard on this, and I just want to thank them all. They really did a terrific job. Thank you very much. Thanks for your patience.